Jack the Giant Killer. Part 2. The prince went to bed very mournfully, but Jack put on the cap of knowledge, which told him that the lady was forced by the power of enchantment to meet the wicked magician every night in the forest. He, therefore, put on his coat of darkness, and his shoes of swiftness, and was there before her. When the lady came, she gave the handkerchief to the magician. Jack with his sword of sharpness cut off his head with one blow, and the enchantment was ended in a minute. The next day the lady was married to the prince, and soon after went with her husband to the court of King Arthur, where Jack was made one of the knights of the Round Table for his heroism. Very soon Jack set off in search of new adventures. On the third day of his travel he came to a wide forest. Hardly had he entered it when he heard dreadful shrieks and cries, and soon he saw a monstrous giant dragging along by the hair of their heads a handsome knight and a beautiful lady. Their tears and cries melted Jack's heart. He alighted from his horse, and put on his invisible coat, and immediately attacked the giant. He could not reach up to the giant's body, so, taking a mighty blow, he cut off both the monster's legs just below the garter, so that he fell full length upon the ground. Then Jack set his foot upon his neck and plunged his sword into the giant's body. The knight and the lady, overjoyed, begged Jack to come to their house to refresh himself after this fight. But Jack, hearing that the giant had a brother who was more cruel and wicked even than himself, would not rest until he had also destroyed him. Soon he came in sight of the cavern where the giants lived. There was the other giant sitting on a huge block of timber, with a knotted iron club lying by his side. Jack, in his coat of darkness, was quite invisible. He drew close up to the giant, and struck a blow at his head with his sword of sharpness. But he missed his aim and only cut off his nose. The giant roared with pain, and his roars were like claps of thunder. He took up his iron club and began to lay about him, but not being able to see Jack, he could not hit him, for Jack slipped nimbly behind, and jumping upon the block of wood, stabbed the giant in the back, and after a few howls, the monster dropped down dead. Having thus killed the two monsters, Jack entered the cave to search for the treasure. One room contained a great boiling cauldron and a dining table, where the giants feasted. Another part of the cave was barred with iron and was full of miserable men and women whom the giants had imprisoned. Jack set them all free and divided the treasure among them. Jack cut off the giant's head, and sent it with the head of his brother to the court of King Arthur. Then he returned to the house of the knight and his lady. He was received with the greatest joy, and the knight gave a grand feast in his honor. When all the company was gathered together, the knight presented Jack with a ring, on which was engraved the picture of the giant dragging the knight and the lady by the hair, with this motto round it: "Behold, in dire distress were we, under a giant's fierce command, but gained our lives and liberty from valiant Jack's victorious hand." But while the merriment was at its height, a herald rushed into the room and told the company that Thundel, a savage giant with 2 heads, had heard of the death of his 2 kinsmen, and was come to take his revenge on Jack. The guests trembled with terror and fright, but Jack only drew his sword and said, "Let him come!" The knight's house was surrounded by a moat over which there was a drawbridge. Jack set men to work to cut the bridge on both sides, nearly to the middle, and then, dressed in his magic coat, went out to meet the giant. As the 151 giant came along, although he could not see Jack, yet he could tell that someone was near, for he cried out, "Fa fe fi fo fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Say you so, my friend?" cried Jack. "You are indeed a monstrous miller." "Ah!" cried the giant. "You are the villain that killed my kinsman." I will tear you with my teeth, and grind your bones to powder. You must catch me first, said Jack. Then he threw off his coat and put on his shoes of swiftness, and began to run, the giant following him like a walking castle. Jack led him round and round the house, and then he ran over the drawbridge, while the giant rushed after him with his club. But when he came to the middle of the bridge, where it had been cut on both sides, his great weight broke it, and he tumbled into the water. Jack now got a cart rope and flung it over his 2 heads, and then, by the help of a team of horses, drew him to the edge of the moat, where he cut off his heads. Once again, Jack set out in search of new adventures. He went over fields and dales without meeting with any, until he came to the foot of a high mountain. Here was a little, lonely house, and when he knocked at the door it was opened by an old man with a beard as white as snow. This old man was a good hermit, and when Jack had eaten well he said, "My son, I know that you are the famous conqueror of giants. I know, at the top of this mountain there is an enchanted castle, kept by a giant named Galligantes, who, by the help of a magician, gets many knights into his power, whom he changes into beasts. Above all, I lament the hard fate of a duke's daughter, whom they have changed into a deer. Many knights have tried to destroy the enchantment, yet none have been able to do so, because of 2 fiery griffins who guard the gates of the castle. But as you, my son, have an invisible coat, you may pass them by without being seen. On the gates of the castle you will find engraved the means by which the enchantment may be broken." Jack promised that in the morning he would risk his life in an endeavor to break the enchantment, and after a sound sleep, he arose early and set out on his attempt. He passed by the fiery griffins without the least fear of danger, for they could not see him, because of his invisible coat. On the castle gate he found a golden trumpet hanging, under which were written these words: "Whoever can this trumpet blow shall cause the giant's overthrow." Jack seized the golden trumpet and blew a mighty blast, which made the gates fly open and shook the castle to its foundations. The giant and the magician, knowing that their end was now near, stood biting their thumbs and shaking with terror. Jack, with his magic sword, soon killed the giant, and the magician was carried off by a whirlwind. The castle vanished away like smoke, and the duke's daughter and all the knights and lovely ladies who had been turned into birds and beasts returned to their proper shape. Jack's fame rang through the whole country, and the king gave him a large estate to reward him for all his brave and knightly deeds. And Jack married the duke's daughter, and lived in joy and contentment for the rest of his days.